I stand, all of the ground is sinking sand. So stomp your feet and clap your hands, our feet are on the rock. On Christ's solid rock I stand, all of the ground is sinking sand. So stomp your feet and clap your hands, our feet are on the rock. On Christ's solid rock I stand, all of the ground is sinking sand. So stomp your feet and clap your hands, our feet are on the rock. When I feel my heart about to break, I will cling to your unchanging grace. Let the waters come and me back in way. I'll be dancing in the rain. When I feel my hope about to break, I will cling to your unchanging grace. Let the waters come and me back in way. I'll be dancing in the rain. 'Cause my feet are on the rock. My feet are on the rock. My feet are on the rock.
Good morning and welcome to the Bridge. We are so thankful that you are joining us again this morning. We only have a couple more weeks where you will have to watch online, and then we're going to be getting back together June 7th, and you will have the option to come and worship with us in person, or of course still watch it online. But we are working on that day. We're working hard on that day to take all precautions and follow all guidelines, but still make it feel like church, because we have missed you guys, and we know that you have missed coming. And so we are working hard to make June and July look like your normal church family while also being safe and healthy. And so if you are feeling healthy and you're not immune compromised, we want you to come join us on June 7th and keep joining us this summer. It's going to be a fun summer. We have a lot of things planned. One of those things is we will have small groups starting this summer. So June and July, we're looking at Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and that will just be a chance for you to come up and meet with a small group of people. And we will cap that, of course, but we will practice social distancing and all of that here in the lobby, but still be able to really talk about the messages and what we're learning and just encourage each other as well. So that will be coming up in June, and you'll hear more about it. Also, we have our mission trip to Mexico that will be over fall break, so October 10th through the 17th. If you want more information about that, let me know. But it is just a chance for us to take a small group from our church and partner with an organization right outside of Mexico City called Living Hope International. There's an orphanage, a school, a doctor's office, and we just get to partner and help the locals there serve their community. And we went a year ago and just had an amazing time, and so want to offer that to you as well. And so if you're interested in that, going as a family or going as yourself, as an individual, just let me know. You can email the church or send us a message anytime. I also know, I just want to acknowledge that we are getting to this point where we're all weary of this new normal that we're living in. We are ready to be back together. I know watching online is getting wearisome, and we can kind of get lazy about it all. But I just want to remind you that one of the reasons why we worship is we are getting to sing our prayers to God, but we're also reminding ourselves of God's promises when we worship. And so I invite you today to really sing out with the band, to really join us in worship, because that's how we then get our feelings to change sometimes. Our circumstances might look the same, and we don't have to wait for our feelings to change. We can worship, and that is going to change who we are and how we are. And so I'm so glad you're joining us today, and let's continue on in worship.
I saw Satan fall like lightning. I saw darkness run for cover. But the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. I believe in signs and wonders. I have resurrection power. Still the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. Yeah, my name belongs to you forever. This is my together, sons and daughters, bought with blood and washed in water. Sing the praises of the Spirit, Son, and Father. Our God will finish what He started. Oh yes, our God will finish what He started. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify that Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Yes, I believe. If I'm not dead, then you're not done. Greater things still to come. Oh, I believe. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify that Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. Oh, this is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote the story. I'll testify that Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From a mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. Oh, I am a child of God, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. Oh, I am a child of God.
Good morning. Welcome to The Bridge. We're glad that you chose to spend some time with us this morning. If you are visiting for the first time online, we appreciate you being a part. I hope that you'll check in on the page in the comment section or communicate with us. You can message us or email us at any point. We'd love to be able to know that you plugged in, that you checked in with us. If you have any questions, we would love to try to answer those questions. And then once you are comfortable doing it and once we are able to have guests in this place, we hope that you will take at least one Sunday to come and visit us in person. We would love to see you. We'd love to welcome you and get to know you and get to put a face with the name. So feel free to come back as soon as we possibly can have visitors in this place. As you probably already heard, on June the 7th, we're going to have live service options for you. So if you're feeling up to it, if you're in good health and feel like you can risk that, we'd love for you to be able to be with us. We're going to take all the precautions we can to make it the safest, most comfortable environment that we can within the regulations that we have, and we look forward to worshiping with many of you in person. The rest of you continue to connect with us online. We love having you as a part of our family. We're going to continue this week with our series that we're calling On My Own. We're taking a look at different people throughout history who have been forced or even by choice have taken some time alone, have been distanced, have been separated from those that they love, those that they care about, and have gotten alone and spent some time with God. We're looking at each of those scenarios and then looking to see what it was they learned about God, what it was they learned about themselves, and then what values and principles that we can take into our own lives even today. And the person we're going to look at this week, his name is Jacob. His story is found in the book of Genesis, so if you have a Bible with you this morning, have access to one, we encourage you to open up the book of Genesis, first book of the Bible, and in a moment we'll be in chapter 32. Jacob's life is long, it's drawn out, and we have so much of it in Scripture. It's incredibly interesting, but I don't have time to tell you the entire story. But where we're going to pick up today is we find Jacob, who having spent many years working for his father-in-law, which began as a way of earning the right to marry Rachel, who he loved very much. After years of doing that, their relationship is at a boiling point, and there is a lot of bad blood between them. There is jealousy, there is deception, there's paranoia, and it's time for them to separate. Otherwise, there's going to be a battle there in the house. So God actually intervenes and speaks to Jacob and says, I want you to go home. I want you to pack up your family and go home. Go back to where you came from, to your home place. And that was the problem, because Jacob left home years and years ago, not under the best circumstances. He had actually deceived his brother. He had robbed him in many ways, and his brother was so angry with him that he said he was going to kill him. And Jacob's mother took him aside and said, you got to get out of here. You've got to leave the house. Otherwise, your brother's going to kill you. He's wanting to seek revenge, and he's not going to stop. You've got to get out of here. And that was why he left in the first place and found himself there with his father-in-law, ultimately, a man named Laban. He married a couple of his daughters, and we'll get into that here in a moment. But years had passed, but there had never been any reconciliation between Jacob and Esau. So Jacob is having to leave his father to avoid a civil war, and now his option is to go back home, and it seems like that might actually happen anyway, because Esau is there waiting on him, ready to exact revenge. Well, when Jacob packed his family up, packed up everything that he owned, and made the trip, he began to try to figure out how he was going to make this work. How was he going to save his own life? How was he going to save the lives of his family members? What was he going to do with all of his possessions? And so as he's moving, he is working on a plan. And he got to a point in the journey where he was pretty close to being home, but it was time to stop for the night. So he set up camp, and he went to some of his messengers and said, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go to my brother Esau, and I want you to tell him that Jacob is coming. But Jacob is not coming empty-handed. Let him know that I'm bringing gifts with me. You see, for Jacob to go home, he's not going home because he's in need. He's going home because he's afraid. He's going home because he's at odds with Laban, his father-in-law. Jacob actually is incredibly wealthy at this point. He has a ton of stuff. He's got a huge family. And he's on his way trying to figure out how he's going to reconcile or just coexist with his brother. And as he's thinking this thing through, he's thinking it's got to be with my possessions. Perhaps the prosperity that I have, all the stuff that I have, maybe I can use that as leverage with, or even as protection from, my brother Esau. Well, as he's working out his plan, the messengers come back and they say, we made it, and we saw Esau, and we gave him your message. And Esau told us that he's actually going to come meet you, and he's bringing 400 of his men with him. And in Genesis chapter 32, verse 7, Jacob was greatly afraid, it says, and distressed. He divided the people with him into two camps, along with the flocks, cattle, and camels. He thought, if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, the remaining one can escape. So in his mind, I need to divide up my stuff. I need to divide up my people, even divide up my family. Because when Esau comes, if he chooses to attack, he can't take us all at once if we're not all together. So I'm going to work on the plan and try to figure this whole thing out. How should I divide up my possessions? How should I divide up my people? And how am I going to approach Esau or be prepared for him if he reaches me before I reach him? And the plan that Jacob came up with was to go home with a parade of gifts. Not just a basket, not just a bucket, not just a barrel full of gifts, but literally to bring a parade of gifts and do it in a parade caravan kind of style. So he went to one of his servants and said, I want you to round up 200 female goats from our livestock, and I want you to be prepared to lead these goats the rest of the way. Then he went to another servant and said, I'm going to have you take 20 male goats, and I want you to lead them. Then he went to another servant and said, I want you to take 200 female sheep, and I want you to herd them in, and you're going to be in charge of the sheep. He went to another and said, 20 rams for you. To another, you're going to have 30 camels and the babies of those camels. And to another, you're going to have 40 cows. To another, 10 bulls. To another, 20 female donkeys. And then to another servant, 10 male donkeys. So he's got all of these possessions, all of this livestock. And he gives these servants different herds, different groups to take care of, to provide for, and to lead in this caravan, this parade of gifts that he has. And he even told his servants, he said, I want you to keep some distance between you and the servant and livestock in front of you. Because in his mind, this is how it was going to work. His first servant would show up, and the servant would be there with 200 female goats. And the servant was told to go to Esau and say, these are gifts from my Lord. These are gifts for our Lord Esau. And Jacob is right behind us. Everyone was to say that. These are gifts from my Lord. These are gifts to my Lord. And Jacob is right behind us. These are gifts from my Lord. These are gifts to my Lord Esau. And the one that has these and owns these, Jacob, is right behind us. And it was going to happen over and over and over again. And Jacob's hope was that by the time Esau got to Jacob, he would either be exhausted, bored out of his mind, or so impressed with all the gifts that Jacob would bring Esau that he would spare his life. In chapter 32, verse 12, we read, so the gift was sent on ahead of him while he remained in the camp that night. During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female slaves, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, along with all of his possessions. There is fear and desperation, then there is fear and desperation. And Jacob was a wreck. I pray that none of you ever experienced that level of panic, the level that Jacob was experiencing that night. But he was at the point of physically trembling, his hands shaking, insecurities mounting, weighed down by regret, over and over and over again, asking himself and asking God, what have I done? How did I get to this point? How did I bring all of this on me? I'm here at this point where I'm running from my father-in-law. I'm running to my brother who wants to kill me. I don't know what my future is going to hold. There is severe panic with Jacob. And in verse 24, we read, after he sent his family on across even, that Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. So there's this odd verse here in the middle where it says he was in his tent and he was jumped by another man. A man approaches him and fights him, and they begin to wrestle, and they wrestle all night long. Now, we're never told the name of this individual. We're just told he is the man. And as we read the rest of the story, and as we look back and begin to put pieces together, we can see that Jacob looked at this man, looked at this experience, as if he was literally spending that night wrestling with God himself. So whether it was a messenger of God, an angel of God, or as some have suggested, when God's presence is revealed in physical form, it's in the form of Jesus. So perhaps even Jacob was jumped by Jesus in his tent, but there's something that's going on there, this wrestling match, this fight that's happening. And Jacob wrestled with him all night long. But we're just told he is the man. In verse 25, it says, when the man saw that he could not defeat him, he struck Jacob's hip socket as they wrestled and dislocated his hip. Then he said to Jacob, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. What is your name? The man asked. Jacob, he replied. Your name will no longer be Jacob, he said. It will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he answered, why do you ask my name? And he blessed him there. Jacob then named the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, he said, and I have been delivered. So he has this experience, this wrestling match, this fight with the man. And at the end of it, when it's all over with, daybreak comes, and Jacob begins to pack up his possessions and get reunited with his family as they begin to make this last leg of the journey towards home to go reunite, to go see Esau and see how he would respond. But in verse 31, we realize that he is not going home on this last leg the same way he began this journey. It says, the sun shone on him as he passed by Penuel, limping because of his hip. I'm certain that morning, as Jacob is reunited with his family, with Rachel, the wife that he loved dearly, with his sons, I'm sure some of them said, Dad, what's with the leg? Or is it the hip or your back? What went on? I can even imagine Rachel saying, honey, what did you do? What happened during the night? Where did you go? What is wrong? And I can just as easily hear Jacob saying, you wouldn't believe it if I told you. Just let's go on. I'll try to explain later. So Jacob limped, leading his family on the way home at the back of this caravan, the back of this parade of gifts that he's going to present to Esau. Well, when he saw Esau and the men that were with him, Jacob only knew to step outside, to kneel down, as broken as he was, and beg for mercy. And in chapter 33, verse 4, it says, but Esau ran to meet him, hugged him, threw his arms around him, and kissed him, and then they wept. Esau said, what do you mean by this whole procession that I met? To find favor with you, my lord, he answered. I have enough, my brother, Esau replied. Keep what you have. But Jacob said, no, please, if I have found favor with you, take this gift from my hand, for indeed I have seen your face, and it is like seeing God's face, since you have accepted me. The procession, the parade of gifts appears to have not been necessary. Because all this time, Jacob had in his mind that Esau wanted to kill him, but at some point, Esau just wanted to be reunited with his brother. He was ready for that. So he shows up and says, Jacob, what's the deal with all the gifts, all the goats and the lamb and the camels and the oxen and the cows? Why? Why aren't you in the front leading? He says, I want you to have these gifts. And Esau says, no, I don't want those. Jacob insisted that he have those gifts. And they had this reunion that Jacob said was like seeing the face of God. He said, to see you, to experience your forgiveness and acceptance in my life, it's more than a relational thing. This is a spiritual thing. This is an answer to prayer. This is more than relief. This is actually as if I'm seeing the face of God. Now, there are two lessons I believe that Jacob picked up in the last 24 hours of this story here. From the time he went into the tent and wrestled all night long to the time he meets Esau face to face. Something that really began in the tent in that moment of isolation and separation and was revealed when he connected with Esau. And the first is this: even a regretful journey can lead to a hopeful place. Even a regretful journey can lead to a hopeful place. If you go back and read the story of Jacob and all that happened up until that point, you'll read that Jacob had actually broken his dad's heart. He'd broken the relationship with his brother. He had been at the center of a conflict between his dad and his mom. He ran for his life. Obviously, he found himself there in the home of Laban. He fell in love with Rachel, and Laban said, "You can have her if you're willing to work for it." Then after some time, Laban himself deceived Jacob, and he gave him Rachel's sister instead. And he said, "This is not the one I'm in love with." He said, "Well, you can also have Rachel if you work a little more." So as time went on, then we find Jacob with two different wives, one that he loves, one that he just has. And the one that he doesn't love continues to give him son after son, while the one that he loves is unable to have children. And then they both decide that they're going to have their female servants get involved, and there are more children born to him from these female servants. It's so dysfunctional. And then he and Laban get into it, and it's time to leave. And when they leave, Rachel actually steals from her father. Her father tracks them down and says, "Jacob, you've stolen from me." He had no idea what Rachel had done. So he's there not understanding what's going on. There's a fight ensuing. His own wife is deceiving her dad. There is so much dysfunction and so many messed up things in this family. And yet in this moment, God breaks through. He wrestles with Jacob and he says, "What is your name?" And Jacob says, "Well, you know my name, it's Jacob." But his name means deceiver. He says, "Your name is not going to be deceiver anymore. You're going to be known as the one that wrestled with God and survived. Your new name is Israel. I realize what you've been through, but this is not what's going to define you. As regretful and as frustrating and as difficult as your journey to this place has been, I'm going to make a change now. On this next chapter of your life, you're going to be defined by your relationship with me." And many of you have taken some difficult, winding roads to get to where you are. Your path has labeled you a liar or a cheater. You've been labeled by others as lazy or bitter, and maybe you've labeled yourself a disappointment or even a fool. But most of the time, we assume how we are while we're on this road is how we're going to be forever. But this is a great reminder that even your story can have a different kind of ending. Even your regretful story can have a hopeful ending. So if you're surrounded by memories that are actually regrets, understand that your story does not have to end this way. And even tomorrow's chapter of the story does not have to be this way. Jacob assumed that that was as good as it's going to get. I mean, he's a runaway. He jacked up his own family. He ran, and he looked like he messed up another family. Now he's caught in between two wars, and God shows up and says, no, I'm ready to do something different in your life. And your regretful journey can lead to a very hopeful place. God is more than willing to meet you on your journey to or from regret and lead you to a place of hope. The second thing that I believe Jacob learned through this night, through this time he had with God, is that God is willing to give you a limp to give you a life. God is willing to give you a limp like Jacob had to give you a life. God broke Jacob's body, but he healed Jacob's spirit. And for the rest of his life, this limp, this physical struggle would be a reminder of this time when God broke through and gave him a real reason to live and helped him to be able to recapture the joy of living and of experiencing the gifts that God had given him. God gave them to him at a cost, though. While they were fighting, Jacob refused to tap out, and as a result, he was forever reminded of this struggle and forever reminded of this fight. But he's also forever reminded of the time that he was no longer going to be called deceiver. He was going to be called the one that wrestled with or contended with God and actually survived. He would forever be known as someone who had a connection with God. He would be known for his relationship to God. So the question, I think, for you, the question for me is, how badly do we want it? How badly do we want God's favor in our lives? How badly do we want God's presence and God's power to not just follow us, but to be with us and to allow us to do things we never thought possible. Jacob was willing at any cost to take it. And ultimately, he gave him a limp that he would have for the rest of his life. I'm not saying that it's going to cost you a physical limp. It might be a financial limp. It might be an emotional or relational limp. But there may be a cost to experiencing God's favor and God's power in your life. There may be a cost that you haven't necessarily counted. But if you're willing and you want it badly enough and you're willing to do whatever it is that God requires of you, you'll experience the same blessing that he had. And you'll no longer be known as the one with the regrets, or you'll no longer be known as the one that messed things up. You'll no longer be known as the one who couldn't fulfill any promises that he made or she made to other people. You'll no longer be known as the one who had unmet expectations. You'll actually be able to be known as the one who is a child, a follower of Jesus, known differently. God is willing to give you a limp in order to give you life. So let me leave you with this phrase today. Don't let the route you took or the shape you're in keep you from coming home. Don't let the route you took, whatever it was to get to where you are today, or the shape you're in, how you are now as a result of that road. Don't let the route you took or the shape you're in keep you from coming home. At the Bridge, we have 5 core values, and those of you who are a part of our family know that. And one of those 5 is to lead people home. Because if we're not leading people home, if we're not leading people across the bridge from death to life, and if we're not going across the bridge ourselves, if we're not living that abundant, free life that God's given us, then we're not successful in completing the mission that God has given us. Because ultimately, it's about coming home. There are reasons that we go away, and there are struggles that we uncover in our lives we didn't even know we had, and there are things to work on, and there are amends to make, but ultimately it starts with coming home, and nothing is more important than coming home. And I can't help but think about that value and read a story like this and be reminded of something that Jesus said thousands of years later when he told the story of a man who lost everything. He gave it away. He wasted his life. All the opportunities, all the gifts, all the possessions, all the money. He wasted everything. And he decided to go home. Not because his heart had changed, but because he was starving. But because he had nothing left. He had no friends. He had no money. He had no place to go. Had no place to stay. And he said, I'll just go home and take whatever beating that I need to take when I get there. I know I'll never be the same. I know I'll never be accepted again, but I'm just going to go home because I have no other choice. And as Jesus tells the story, he said, instead of receiving the beating, instead of receiving the punishment that he thought he was going to get, his dad actually ran up the driveway, hugged him, and said, we've got a lot to talk about, but we're not going to do that now. We're just going to celebrate that you've come home. I want to throw you a party because ultimately my son who was lost is now home. And Jesus equated that story with the way God handles us. So whatever it is that caused you to leave home, whatever it is that pushed you away from what really matters and what you know is important in life, don't let the route you took or the shape you're in keep you from coming home. Today may be the day that you decide, whatever happens, happens, but I can't stay here anymore. I'm ready to come home. Spiritually speaking, I'm ready to come home. Would you close this time out with prayer, and would you bow your heads and close your eyes if you're able to and pray with me? And if you're already a follower of Jesus, maybe you're guilty of ignoring and of abusing some of the gifts and privileges that God has given you, and today is a day to reaffirm your commitment to Him. But if you're not a follower of Jesus, this is the day to come home. The time when you would say, God, I really have nothing to bring. I really have nothing to offer. I'm just going to bring myself. And if that's enough, then I'm ready to come home. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for loving us enough to welcome us with open arms in spite of all that we've done, in spite of all the places that we've been, in spite of all the times when we have not followed through with the promises that we've made, or we've gone back and we've slipped back into our old ways or slipped back into struggles that we thought we had left behind. God, I pray that you would meet with us now. And God, I believe that there are people in our church family, our extended family that are with us online today that are ready at whatever cost it is for them to hold on to you and beg for your favor and your blessing. And God, I pray that you would allow us to experience that time, a renewed time with you. Whatever the limp is, God, help us to be willing to pay that price, because you paid the ultimate price for our own salvation. And now for us, the cost of being able to walk with you may be great, but it's nothing compared to what you've done to bring us home. So God, thank you for loving us. I pray that those who are wrestling with you right now would continue to fight and not tap out, but to hold on, to be willing to do whatever it takes to be known and according to their relationship with you. Father, thank you for being willing to change our names and change our past and give us a new hope and give us a new future. God, thank you for loving us, and I pray that we would welcome others in the same way that you've welcomed us. And I pray that leading people home would be the most important thing that we do with our lives. We ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Saturday was sad, surely it was through. Since when is impossible ever start with you? Fridays disappoint, Sundays empty too. Since when is impossible ever start with you? This is the sound of a dry bones rattling. This is a praise, make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of a dry bones rattling. Pentecostal fire, stirring something new.